Yeah, I mean, I think it's a, well, first I think it's a, there's a lot of different ways of characterizing, I think, what the lean startup sort of movement is. I think some of the principles are, I could agree wholeheartedly with, like, you know, as much as possible, iterate on your product, get quick feedback, be prepared to pivot. Don't like one exercise I like to do is at Hunch is like every day, pretty much every day, think if I were starting the company over today, how would I build a product to avoid kind of the sunk costs problem, which is you sort of get too married to things you've already built, and always be ready to sort of throw out anything you've already done. And so those kinds of concepts I think are very good. I think sometimes it's maybe, I don't know if this is core to the concept, but I think it's misapplied in many cases to think that every product should be buildable in 3 weeks or something, right? Like my last company, Site Advisor, we were trying to rate every website on the web and say whether it was a safe website or not. There's just no way I think you could have built there's no way to do that, and you can't rate half the web and then let the other, and let half the websites infect you and the other half not. I mean, a security product's got to either protect you or not, and it's got to do it with a high degree of confidence. And so I think that there's just no way you could have built that in under 15 months or something with serious engineering and a lot of upfront capital. And so you needed you needed some real money behind it and some real talent. And I think other cases, there can be sort of these quick little fun things you toss up there. I think Twitter kind of began as an experiment, right? Like a side thing from Odeo, and grew into something more. So I think there are other products which can sort of have that. I tend to think there's sort of a Goldilocks principle in terms of how much technology you want. That you want sort of. Well, I think there's a couple things. Like first, it depends on like you can build equity value for consumer internet company through a number of different ways. One of them is by building a brand. One is sort of network effects. One is just having a lot of users. One is having some real sustainable, defensible technology. Data is a very interesting asset these days. But if you're doing like something with real technology, like a search engine or something, with a startup, you need to kind of balance. It can't be. It's very hard for a startup to do something like, speech recognition or natural language translation or, setting up a global WiMAX network or something, because these things are just way too capital intensive. On the other hand, if it's totally trivial, it's so easily copied and not interesting, and so there's some sort of happy middle ground. Yeah, I mean, so at first, you see two breeds, right? You see, so I live in New York, and you see the Wall Street person trying to go start a company, and that's just almost always a recipe for disaster, right? I wouldn't invest in that, basically, period. And then because they're used to making lots of money, and they have no idea of how to run things leanly, and they don't value the product the way they should, and there's all sorts of things. Then I think you see another class, which is the MIT students who 2 years ago would have worked at a hedge fund and now are thinking a startup might be interesting, and they're sort of still they're still uncorrupted. And I think you see a lot of these programs like Y Combinator, which really help them, I think, a lot in teaching them a lot of important sort of basic things. So I'm actually quite impressed, especially with the Y Combinator types that come out and they're really savvy. There's a lot of good blogs out there. They read all this stuff. They know about it. Venture capital used to be so murky and insidery, and I think it's gotten more exposed. Through the blogs and through these mentorship programs and things. I think that's sort of a good thing. So I think you see savvier entrepreneurs. In terms of mistakes, kind of my blog, I thought in a lot of ways I sort of think of my blog as written with the reader being a 24-year-old entrepreneur. So I try to enumerate those mistakes and explain them. I think a lot of the mistakes, you don't make a successful company based on the financing, but there's a ton of ways to screw it up and to get screwed. And so I actually sort of began my blog as sort of like a VC countermeasures kind of blog, sort of go through all the different tricks they do and expose them and show. And so I have one of my favorite posts, no one really seemed to like it, but I thought it's basically saying the history of venture capital innovation is the history of how to create options on startups in more obfuscatory ways. So they started off doing tranching or something, and then they move on to getting actual warrants in the company, and then they go on to now the big craze is everyone has a seed program, and they don't have a contractual option, but they have an option through their signaling power. If they don't do the follow-on, you're screwed, and so then they have tons of pricing power over your next round, and young entrepreneurs don't get this. And so every 3 years they come up with a new thing, and it's like they give them these cute names. A lot of them aren't even called the same name as the firm deliberately, to sort of throw them off or whatever. So I think this kind of stuff I think is there's a whole industry. I think there's really just two kinds of investors in the world. There are investors who think there's like the Ron Conways who try to create value by finding good people and helping them build something great. And then there's other people who try to take a piece of someone else's thing, right? There's sort of the builders and the extractors. And I think recognizing the difference between the two and being able to avoid the extractors is a critical thing. And that's what sort of half of what I blog about, I guess. A lot of people, I think there's a general feeling that there's, and I agree with it, that there's, people are just trying to sort of flip their company to Google or whatever the case, and Apple now, I guess, Microsoft, whatever, and I think that's, I mean, it's not. There are plenty of exceptions, but I think that's generally true. And look, I think I've had, so for example, investments I've made where the entrepreneur was faced with the decision of flipping the company, and I thought in some cases it made sense. Like sometimes the cards are on. It's like if you don't do it, they're going to build it, and you're screwed, and you better just sell it, and you get a win on the board, and you go start another company, right? But like you should never ever set out with the goal to be to flip it, because you just have I happened to sell SiteAdvisor, my last company, but it was just because like the market forces, it was because Microsoft announced they were coming out with a new product. McAfee and Symantec decided they desperately needed to have something. We were like positioned very well in sort of search and security, which was sort of a whole bunch of themes coming together. If it turned out Microsoft's product, their OneCare product was a bomb, had they launched that product 8 months before, I don't think we would have been acquired because McAfee and Symantec would have seen that it was a bomb and wouldn't have been as frightened and would have just sort of sat on their existing products and not have felt the need to innovate. So like literally the timing, I mean, we can talk I'm sure we did some smart things and took a risk and everything else, but the timing was huge. And if you have to have a plan, it's just simply irresponsible to plan to flip it, I think. I do think to Zuckerberg's credit, he's avoided selling Facebook and is building something big. I think it seems the same way, hopefully, with Twitter. They haven't sold. They're second-time entrepreneurs, so maybe it's different. These things go through waves, and everyone you're always looking at the latest, like Friendster didn't sell, and they could have, and then the thing fell apart, and then everyone afterwards was like, oh God, don't make the Friendster mistake, and then then the next example was Facebook didn't sell, and now everyone's like, wow, they're so smart they didn't sell, and now people aren't selling, and then it's sort of like everyone's sort of fighting the last war and looking at the last example. One of the reasons, for example, that we raised money from Khosla Ventures is, I don't know if you know Vinod Khosla, but they very, very much believe that sort of the venture world has, I think, gone in the wrong direction with sort of, investing for the flip or something, and they're making really, really big bets. I mean, the single most important question to them is, are you trying to flip this company, and if so, we don't want to invest. Like, I had to answer that question 30 times. I said I'd sign a piece of paper if you want me to, saying I won't. That's why a lot of their investments, frankly, aren't in IT, because probably the biggest challenges we face aren't in IT. They're doing clean tech and all sorts of other things, right? I don't know. I mean, right or wrong, I don't know if they'll make money or not. I don't really know anything about that sector, but they're making big, ambitious bets on the long term, and I think that for me was like the big attraction of joining up with them, right? I think it's relatively rare these days, and I think a lot of it has to do with just it's like if you get to be a partner at a VC firm and they judge you over your next 2 years' results, and there's all these incentives. The whole system is kind of especially with the public markets, CEOs are judged per quarter. How the hell is anyone who's a non-founder CEO of a tech company, for example, going to do anything that's more than 6 months out, right? I mean, you can't, because you'll get fired. I mean, so the whole system is I think the private markets are one of the places where things actually work reasonably well, simply because there are there are investors who take 5 to 10 year horizons, unlike in the public markets. And so that's where I think a lot of the interesting innovation is happening. I mean, my personal obsession is sort of what I would describe as artificial intelligence, machine learning. I think that there are that with really big data, it's not just a difference in degree; it becomes a difference in kind. It's like you can really do dramatic and exciting and interesting things, and I think that over the next 5 years, that'll be. I think we're trying to do that with Hunch is one thing, but I think that to me is a incredibly exciting area. I mean, I don't know, like I think I'm an Apple fanboy. I think the iPad is way underhyped. I think it's a revolutionary, remarkable product. The iPhone, the whole mobile market is finally exciting again. It was, the carrier chokehold that was just killing handset innovation seems to be over. People underappreciate that Steve Jobs single-handedly reshaped a very rigid and entrenched value chain. In one stroke, took all the power away from the carriers and gave it to the handsets and opened things up for Android, and it's just one of the most phenomenal business moves, and has made that market, I think, go from a really uninteresting one from an entrepreneur's perspective to a really exciting one.